YouTube Oziko and the Goat House is back, and today we're starting a video from an 8-video series. So this is the first one with the AFC East, and later today we'll do the NFC East. But what we're doing here is trying to fix the cap space situation for every single NFL team. We're going to take a look at who those teams can cut, who they can't cut, what the cap space situation would look like when we do these things. And then take a look at some contracts and what could happen here this offseason, what the cap space situations could actually look like for each of these teams, your team out there. Don't worry, we'll do every single team, but like I said, we're starting with the AFC East, and later today we'll do the NFC East, and we'll keep going each day, 2 divisions, and you guys have a chance to vote for which divisions we do on the next day. So we'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, full NFL coverage here. This is an off-season video. Of course, we already got a bunch of off-season videos, free agency rankings, predictions, what teams should do. More of those videos on the way. We have NFL draft coverage as well, Super Bowl coverage. A recent mock draft went up, Super Bowl picks went up. So we got more NFL content than anybody. I promise you that. So please subscribe. Be much appreciated. Check out Twitter where you can vote for things and you get breaking news and my takeaways instantly when things happen. So check that out. Link in the description in comments for anything that you need, including that sided app where you can talk football and win Amazon gift cards. But here's the Twitter. Make sure you follow it. You guys, I just posted this a little bit ago. You guys are voting for what I do tomorrow. So should I do the AFC and NFC North tomorrow, the South, the West, and then we'll keep doing this. It'll only be a couple polls, obviously, but we'll keep doing this. And it's pretty cool to see where the fans are coming from here. So the AFC and NFC North are winning right now, but I just posted this a little bit ago, so that could change very easily. There's not a whole bunch of votes yet. So make sure you get over there and vote. That'll be much appreciated. You can also follow our Twitter. Link in the description and comments for anything you need. And I'll post a link in the comments of this website. As a huge football guy, this is probably my favorite website. Spot Rack. I don't know how you say it, but it's very cool. This is helping us out a ton. AFC East teams, though, as you can see, that's what we're rolling with today. We're starting with the Buffalo Bills. Very important to keep in mind here. You can see the cap space projection right here. Negative 8.3, so that doesn't look great. But this is with the projected $175 million cap total for each team. So basically the cap number is going down for each team because the COVID situation, teams didn't get the ticket revenue. But it actually might not go that low, we're hearing now. It could be in that 175 to 185 range. So this is kind of the worst case scenario for the Buffalo Bills before we adjust things here. Negative 8.3 million. That's the worst case scenario, but it looks like they're going to be in the negative. So even if it goes, or they can tack on 10 more million, maybe they'll raise it 10 million, and so they'll barely be positive then. But let's see what they can do here and what they can't do. This is going to be very interesting. So the first name I actually want to point out, and by me making these moves, it doesn't mean I think for sure. I'm not predicting they're going to cut these guys, just to get an idea on what they can and can't do and what the cap space could look like. What's the worst negative 8.3 scenario, or what's the best for each team? So John Brown, interesting one here. Very important to their team. He missed some games this year, but he's very important. Fits, has the speed, big playability. But let's just see. If you cut him, you can save a pretty big number there. It's a 7.9 million. You see the cap space goes up, and that's kind of the worst case scenario if they cut John Brown. Now, they do like him a lot, but you got to ask yourself, what is he, 31 years old? Some of these rookie receivers are taking over. I think, would you rather save that 7.9 million and draft a guy in the mid rounds? They hit on Gabriel Davis. They got Stephon Diggs. They got Cole Beasley. So you kind of got to ask yourself that. So, and again, if you're messing around with this site, you can add him back just like that. But we'll have him off for a second. Not that I'm really predicting that. Another big one. Well, here's another one I did. I went down to Lee Smith. He's 34. They have Knox and Croft. So let's get Lee Smith. $2.25 million isn't really a big number in terms of NFL contracts. But that's pretty big here, especially to help the Bills break even. And again, we can add a little more to that if the cap space goes up, and we'll find that out, maybe in February what the number will actually be. But it kind of gives you an idea of what they got to work with here. Starla Tule didn't play last year, just to see. You cut him, you can't cut him. Negative 4.2 million. So, and that's the guy they kind of missed, so they would like him back anyways. I'm just kind of showing what would happen here. Another one, Mario Addison. I wasn't really a big fan of that signing. 34 years old. They gave him a little bit of money. It is hard to come across, experienced pass rushers, and he was somewhat productive. But let's just see. What if you want to cut him? Yeah, $6.16 million. It's a pretty good amount. You do have $4 million in dead cap, but overall you do clear this number over here at 6.16. So that's something to think about. Again, they have a good rotation. They don't have some, stars on their defensive line. So maybe they want to keep him. Jerry Hughes, he had a pretty productive year in terms of getting pressure. He needs to actually get to the quarterback a lot more, though. He's 33 years old. If you cut him, let's just see, $7.3 million. It's a possibility. I'm going to say they probably don't do that, and they definitely won't cut both Addison and Jerry Hughes. Let's just take Addison back up. Maybe they do that. Maybe Epinesa steps up as a starter. Maybe they continue to look for that pass rusher, because when it comes to playoff time, taking the next step and, pressures, you got to turn those pressures into sacks. And that's kind of the defensive line gets pressure, but they're not getting those sacks. So maybe they want to look elsewhere. Offensive line will be interesting because Darrell Williams is a free agent and Feliciano's a free agent. We'll see what they want to do with those guys. Cody Ford's going to be coming back. He could play right tackle. He can play guard. Do they put him at right tackle and decline to re-sign Darrell Williams? Darrell Williams was very impressive this year. Do they move Cody Ford to guard? Do they, can they move around the center position? I'd say they stick with Mitch Morse at center. But they could cut him and save, $4.8 million. So that's something to think about. Anything else here? I mean, I'm sure they'll cut. There's probably some smaller contracts they can cut if they really, because they got Matt Milano's a free agent as well. They can save a decent amount of money there. But I'm sure there's guys down here that they would save money on. Maybe even some practice squad guys. Kumero's been on and off, so I mean maybe they'll have him off again. You can see just to get an idea. Won't sit here and try to cut every small contract guy. Just it kind of gives you an idea. And of course they can restructure. And create dummy years in contracts, void years. And that's almost impossible to predict, but it'll happen. But, I mean, we'll take a contract perhaps. Let's just random. Let's just take Tre'Davious White. This is a pretty cool website. You can pull up the contract. So he just signed in the past offseason here. He's a stud corner for sure. What is that, 2025? So what you can do, here's 2021. You kind of can move some of this salary, 10.5, and he has a cap hit of $14 million. You kind of can move a chunk of that and maybe spread it out, maybe take that signing bonus and, pay it, when he's a free agent. So he still would be a free agent, but you'd choose to pay some of that, create dummy years, when he's not under contract, and who knows, they can extend him, but they're paying him later in the future. So teams will do that, especially this year with, a lot of teams being in the negative because the cap space going down because of the COVID situation. So they can clear more than this. It's almost impossible to predict who will restructure, because you kind of got to know, will that person, who they are as a person, will they restructure, or will they, with the dummy years, the void years, they actually get paid the same amount of money. It's just pushing it back a little bit, so some players, a lot of players will be willing to do that to help out their team for sure. It's not really hurting them all that much. So I think this is kind of worst case scenario if they cut these guys. So that 12.283, if they cut these guys, that it's probably going to be more than that, 15 to 18 million range, keeping in mind they may raise that cap number from 175. It's never been that low, so technically it's still dropping, but and with the restructures and, just restructures in general. So this is kind of worst case if they cut these guys for the Buffalo Bills. We can see they don't have the prettiest, the sexiest cap number there. Move on to the Miami Dolphins, 22.5, and this is worst case, scenario. So that's looking pretty good for the Miami Dolphins, 22.5 million. That's looking pretty solid. Here's the thing I noticed with them. Is there guys you really can cut here? I think Albert Wilson could be on the way out. That saves $2.85 million, so it bumps it up a little bit there. They don't have a whole bunch of guys they can cut. Could they cut Jakeem Grant? Do they cut both of them, create even more holes at receiver? They do want to buff the receiver class, their receiver unit, I should say, further. So maybe they're okay with doing that. They could keep Grant. Who knows? That can save a little bit more. Jesse Davis could be a guy, because they have Robert Hunt right now who played right tackle. He can potentially slide into guard, but the only way they would do that is if they found another right tackle. So if they did that, they could afford to move on from a guy like Jesse Davis perhaps, but experienced guy for rotation, is it worth $2 million? Tackles are kind of hard to come across. Interesting one. Alan Hearn's the name. Yeah, we can just get rid of him, right? Actually, I don't know how they laid out that contract, but it's negative there, so I don't know if it's really worth it, especially to cut 3 receivers. So I don't know how that happened. It's not even $500,000, but still, you don't want that negative there. And you look at the other guys here. I'm sure there'll be guys further down this list that'll save a little bit of money, but it take us all day to figure out that which guys they can cut and whatnot, whatever. So these are guys. There's not too many. There's not too many they can cut, and sometimes it's a bad thing. You kind of want there to be opportunities to clear space, but it's not a bad thing in this scenario because the Dolphins already have a pretty decent amount of money. Everybody wants more, perhaps, in terms of the cap space, and they haven't really given out any bad contracts or anything. So, I think they're looking pretty good. Again, they can restructure, push some money back from some guys. That's certainly a possibility. Is there any other guys? Maybe somebody else will spot out somebody that they can cut. A couple guys here. It won't save enough money. It's not like they desperately need the money unless maybe they're going for some big time signings here. So, Jakeem Grant's really not a guy they absolutely have to cut, but just to get an idea, $30.8 million is a possibility there, maybe more. Patriots are looking pretty damn good. $50.7 million. That's big number. That's a big number. And again, that's kind of worst case scenario again for all these teams. That's with the 175 total there. So you're looking down the list of these guys. Do they have anybody they can cut? I don't know if they really have. A lot of guys opted out last year that are coming back. Patrick Chung's coming back. He's 34. Maybe he's declined a little bit. We didn't get to see him play this year. Maybe they want to cut him. But that's a negative number there, so they don't want to do that. So Patrick Chung looks like he should be around. Maybe they can restructure his deal. Bo Allen, they just signed this offseason to kind of be their nose tackle. They could cut him to just try to upgrade 2.8. I don't know if they really do that. Adrian Phillips kind of filled in because some guys were missing. They could move on from him, $2.25 million. Akeem Spence, maybe they'll move on from a guy like that. That saves about $2 million. They don't really have too many options here. Got a lot of young guys down here that they still want to develop here. Marquise Lee, we didn't get to see. I almost forgot about Marquise Lee. What happens if you cut him? It's not even worth it. It's not even worth it. So we'll see if we get a shot looking at him next year. All these guys won't. It won't. Though I'm sure they'll cut some of those guys down there, and they could restructure some deals. But is it even necessary here? They don't have a whole bunch of guys they can cut and save, which is not a bad thing in this situation because they don't have any bad contracts, and they're up to $55 million. That's kind of worst case scenario in my opinion. Devin McCourty's 34. I don't see that moving on from him, but it's not even worth it. Do we need to save $2 million to move on? No, you don't really need to do that. So, Dante Hightower, they missed him a lot, so I don't see this. You do save a whopping $9.9 million, but it's a big time key piece of their team that they missed this year. So they could trade Stephon Gilmore. Obviously, not going to cut him. You can process the trade, and that looks at a $9.5 million. So that boosts them up even more. So to kind of get an idea here, the Patriots are sitting pretty. They do have some free agents they would like to get back, but they got a lot of money there. And then we move on to the Jets, who are also looking pretty good. This is kind of the worst case going into the cuts, off-season, I should say. $62.5 million around there. Again, worst case scenario. So they're going in to I had made a video who teams should cut. Henry Anderson kind of came up mainly because he's a solid player, could be even better in Robert Saleh's scheme. But $8.2 million? Is it worth saving him when you can keeping him when you can save that $8.2 million? I think you probably could cut him. George Fant they'll probably keep around unless it's a whop. Yeah, it's a pretty big number. If they can get better, they got Mekhi Becton at left tackle. If they want to improve their position at right tackle, that's certainly a possibility there. CJ Mosley, we haven't even seen him play for the Jets for the most part, but that is a negative 12 number there. So that's not happening. They got quite a few linemen they can move on. Ryan Griffin, could they move on from $1 million? Is it worth it there? they got quite a few. Lewis, they'll probably hang on to Greg Van Roten. So, yeah, between, maybe they can cut. Let's see what he saves. So it really depends. This is why it gets confusing. Really depends on that saves 3.5 because it's a new scheme, new system in there. LaFleur's running the offense. It depends on who he views as the best fits for his line because this is still a fairly new line. Nothing is set. So somebody else can come in. And Van Roten could play guard, by the way. But somebody else, like LaFleur, can come in and just shift around that offensive line, just who fits that scheme, who's more familiar with it. But again, Fant, they just signed him last offseason. That 7.4 is looking decent. Could they move on from him? McDermott, perhaps. That's really not a lot of money there. So we start to get down here, and there's just not a lot of money to be safe. Herndon's been pretty disappointing, but they probably need the athletic tight end. Yeah, it's not worth it there. I think those offensive linemen are pretty interesting. They probably can move on from some of these guys. Sam Darnold, they could trade or they can hang on to. If they trade him, it saves $4.7 million. So just to kind of give you an idea here, they could roll with Alex Lewis and Van Roten at guard next year. Just kind of top of my head here thinking in that scheme. That's a possibility. But that's besides the point here. So, yeah, they really could boost up that number. They don't necessarily have to do some of these things, but that you just kind of get you an idea that could really boost that amount of cap space, and they maybe an appealing spot now because they do have some young talented guys that are developing like Quinn Williams, like some of these receivers. I think like Jamison Crowder. I mean, he's their best receiver right now, but you can save $10.5 million by doing that. So, if you're confident you could, if they do something like this, if they do something like that, you might be thinking, and they hang on to Sam Darnold, you might be thinking they're taking a receiver second overall, or they're trading back a little bit and grabbing a receiver. I like Denzel Mims, got a bright future, but they like Crowder a lot, but they can save a bit of money. I think those rookie receivers, they're making impacts day one, so saving that $10 million, kind of going back to that, was a 10.5, getting up close to 100 million. Again, this is worst case, so it might be a little more than that. It's probably around 100 million in this scenario. That's pretty appealing there. And again, back to being in maybe more of an appealing spot with the coaching staff they brought in and the young talent they have that are it's more than young talent now. They may be able to bring in the big time free agents because they're appealing and because they have that major cap space. So the Jets could really turn it around. They still have a lot of needs to fill, so they can turn it around, but you can't expect them to go win the Super Bowl or anything in 1 year, of course. But yeah, I love doing this because kind of get an idea where teams could be. This is the first video out of 8. We're going division by division. But it's really cool because there's some teams that are pretty far in the negative right now that, they may stay there or that could actually get far in the positive. And I'll show you how we're going to get to those teams. But again, keep in mind the cap number could be a little different, be adjusted so teams could have more space than this, and teams could restructure, meaning guys can take pay cuts or they can create void years at the end of contracts where they push the money back and they can clear more space. So it's tough to predict. So that's the best, unpredictable stuff's kind of the best part. Surprises happening along the way. But this kind of gives you an idea, a ballpark estimate of the situation teams can be in, and can they make major moves in free agency? Do they have to cut players to make tough decisions to make those major moves? So that's why I really enjoy this. So let me know your guys' thoughts. Again, go to that Twitter and vote. A lot going on there. When these cuts happen, we'll be that's something major about our Twitter. When the cuts happen, we tweet them. We talk about how much space that team saved and where their cap space is at that point. What teams could pick up that guy. We got you covered instantly on that Twitter, so there's a lot going on there. Make sure you follow that. Make sure you subscribe to this channel, all kinds of NFL content here. Smash that like button. Turn notifications on. That's going to do it for this one, though. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.